right, last week of what we started almost 2 months ago, or maybe it's really 2 months ago. Stephanie's here with us again today. Welcome, Stephanie. And the wrap-up call, and this is interesting. Stephanie and I have been talking about this a lot. I don't even know if it's a head-scratcher or it's baffling to people that look at the real estate industry that are from other businesses, but you're going to want to probably listen to this call several times. We're going to go through and we're going to pull out select topics and use this as a wrap-up because of, I don't know, if you were a psychologist, I guess you would probably, Stephanie, call this denial. In other words, agents think the grass is greener if they just change brokerage. They think the grass is greener if I just try a different source of business. Or I don't understand how this doesn't work or works, or I can't get this to work for me. There's a number of themes that we'll touch on today. The reality is, almost every time, it's just the functional fact that the agent is not working. And I'll say that again. If you're not realistically working, you might be kidding yourself and your spouse or family might think you're going to work every day. But if you are not working on what you should be doing, business development and some of the things we'll touch on today, you're not going to succeed. And we'll get into specifics with that in just a moment. But this is, again, something you're going to want to go through and focus on. You're probably going to want to listen to this call several times. We've got a lot to cover today, so I'm going to jump into it here fairly quickly. Some of these slides we're not going to spend a lot of time on. We covered these in an hour-long call each week, so you can go back and dig into it deeper. But, you know, Stephanie, you certainly see this. The shiny object problem is a real problem. I mean, it's something we struggle with coaching clients. We struggle with agents that we've trained. We see it out on social media in discussions. It's almost like the grass is greener on steroids, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not only our industry. I just want to mention this. You know, we are looking at other sources of business for Kevin and I for PURAVIDA Partners, and we're talking to trainers, physical fitness trainers, gyms, doctors. We got oil and gas guys, and I always thought that everybody struggles with this. That doctors open up an office and they don't have the faintest idea on how to build a business, do they? Salons, it blows me away that when I go to my salon, that they always try to confirm my appointment for me, and I never do because I don't know my schedule 30 days out. My point is that all people who own a salon would have to do is call all of their clients who haven't been in a month and get business, couldn't they? I mean, it's that simple. I think it's a nationwide issue about how business, not a nationwide, but it's just culturally, people don't know how to run a business. I'm going to get into real estate because I love houses. And then I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing at RE/MAX, so I'm going to go to Keller Williams. It's no different there. It's you. It's you. You have to be a leader, and you have to act like a COO. You have to act like a CEO, a CIO, all of those things. And if you're not thinking when your feet hit the floor in the morning, how am I going to get business today? Then quit. How's that for quit? Quit hanging around the market center, you know?
And there's a functional problem that I'll touch on these bullets fairly quickly, but the industry and the ecosystem in real estate, like we talked about in the week on shiny objects, is designed to mislead agents. I mean, there are webinars coming out now. I saw one posted this morning where they're going to talk about what you should have spent money on this year. And again, a lot of this stuff, if you look between the lines, is not accurate. They're just looking to find the way to get more money out of agents. Certain things work. And there's this social media bias where we think that, God, if I just try some of this stuff I see lauded out there. And what's interesting is one of the biggest purveyors on social media went through month after month after month, and he actually is responsible for one of these largest groups about what you should spend your money on and all this discussion on the ecosystem of shiny objects. And guess what the case study was that they put out? They put out a case study as one of their big success stories about prospecting, not a shiny object. And what they validated was the core fundamentals of business development work. So if you know what you're looking for, it's validated every time. The latest buzzword, and I'm going to bring this up as I jump through this fairly quickly, is It's no longer belly to belly, which is the old adage of sales where you have to get out and meet people. It's screen to screen. And I'm going to call it like it is. That's complete 100% bullshit. The number do not validate this. The NAR data does not validate this. I'll get into it specifically, but run from anyone that tells you you can go screen to screen and never meet people and succeed. That is not how real estate is transacted. Your conversion rate face-to-face will be higher on average than it will be if you don't meet people. And any of you that have been in the business long enough should know that anybody who's under their own delusion that that's the case is going to run themselves off the rails. And this is what agents do. They look for distractions. They look for something to do other than what they should be doing. And the reasons we'll talk about at length here in the next couple of slides is boring. It's not as exciting than the new hot latest trends. The second part of the problem is, in addition to the social media ecosystem, is some franchises do this. They create a Chinese menu of options with no sort of vetting as to what's valid, what you should do, whether it's appropriate for a particular agent or not. And then people are emulating, instead of out of the industry, business leaders in the industry, people that are lauded as a success, right? You look at somebody who took 3 listings, and they're the number 1 person in their small brokerage, and then everybody's talking about how wonderful this is, yet some other rainmaker who's taking 15 listings a month by himself with an assistant is making 10 times as much money, but they're not seen as the expert because they don't subscribe or gloat in social media. They aren't one of the things that are being pitched out there. So be careful about following the herd. Franchises and other entities in social media want to get you going in the wrong direction. They want you to be off track. And there we talked about that in the shiny object world and during that week about why they want to do that. And here's why the mindset that you have to have is critical. If you wake up every day and go, I hate this, I hate my job, Stephanie had the answer for you. You may have to find a new job and quit. But the boring tasks and habits are what's successful. In that case study that came out from the shiny object purveyor, the boring task that they discussed and why this team was so successful was he, the inside salesperson, in other words, the rainmaker, effectively, that was identifying and converting leads, was prospecting every day at a pace that most people would do 4 days worth of work, and he was working 20. He was talking to 60 to 80 people a day, not 60 to 80 people a week. Now, for a lot of you, you can't talk to that many people every day and be successful in everything else. Well, that's where you go to a model where you may consider inside sales. We talked about this in terms of insourcing and outsourcing during this specific week. You're going to want to go back and probably listen to that call. But just not doing the boring tasks is not an excuse. And I want you to go back and listen to them and repeat it again. The success story that they're talking about, 60 to 80 contacts a day, is the equivalent of what people do in a week. Mm-hmm. Some people do even less than that. So if you're doing it once a week and there are 4 weeks in a month, you're working 4 days a month. And then you scratch your head and go, I don't understand why this doesn't work. It won't work in my market. My market's different. It's not working for me. Well, what's not working is you. You're not working. There is somebody else in your market who's working every day or employing somebody who is. And they are absolutely going through and talking to somebody who's going to list or sell and identifying them and converting them and nurturing them. And this was at a pace of identifying 5 opportunities on average per day. Now, he was doing it 20 times a month. That's 100 opportunities. You were doing it at a pace of 4 times a month. Once a week, you're getting through what he does a day. And then you say, well, I only identified 16 opportunities. Well, who's going to win that race? The person who has 100 opportunities to convert from or the one that has 16? Should be an easy answer. And then you scratch your head and go, I don't understand why it doesn't work. I hate this. Now, what you're not being realistic about, and your bias is such that you've allowed your brain to say, they're boring tasks, they don't work for me, they don't work for my market, I'm not going to do it. Stop chasing exciting things that are not validated. we're going to talk about how consumers on the buy side and the listing side make decisions on who they work with, and talk about what you have to have in your core business in a minute. But avoid the distractions. Focus on the follow-through, and be very, very cautious about trying to chase these shiny objects, and be cautious about being overstressed. Some people are so busy and chaotic, and their work environment is so full of drama, including their client base, that it's going to physically and emotionally drain you. They get stuck up in this unrealistic view that everything should be perfect. They have to be the hero and fire person on every transaction. And at the end of the day, we're not doing brain surgery. Nobody's going to die if a transaction closes 5 days later, doesn't close at all. We have to get realistic about this, or we're going to be overstressed. So the boring and monotonous theme here is critical. So here's the reality, and I'm going to tie this down when I get done with these next 2 slides. You're not going to be able to succeed if you violate the premise. In other words, this is going right after the nonsense and BS of the screen-to-screen discussions that are going on now in these ridiculous groups on social media versus belly-to-belly. This is what NAR says about how buyers and sellers, I'm going to do the buyer side first because the numbers are not that different. I'll go through it fairly quickly. We went through this in detail during the week that we covered this. You're going to, if you want more, go back and listen to that. So here's the reality. What do we know about this? Buyers, 88% purchased a home through an agent. So on the buy side, the vast majority, very few buyers don't use an agent to purchase. And that number is up from 69% in 2001. Well, that flies in the face of all this nonsense you see out there about we're going to get buyers enabled to go purchase their own property sight unseen and everything else. This is not what goes on the buy side of the business. Buyers don't pick celebrity agents. They don't pick all these authorities. Here's how buyers find the agent they're going to work with the majority of the time. They either work with them before, which is 12%. And then you're in the 40%. It depends on the market, but it's always above 40%. So 52% of the time, referral from a friend, family member, neighbor, coworker, somebody from church, and 12% repeat transaction. I'll stop here for a second. Do you think you can be successful on the buy side if you just throw away this side of the business? These 2 sources? No. Now the reality is, the good news is, when I go through these next couple of numbers, you'll see that your opportunity is the weak link between people on the repeat side. On the buy side, they only do 12%. Look at the next number. 2/3 of buyers only interviewed 1 agent. So from a competition standpoint, this isn't like expired listings on the sell side. They're not interviewing 5 agents. All you have to do is get into that referral loop. Friend, family member, neighbor, coworker, church member, whatever you do to disrupt this, because that is 50% of the transactions. If you're in a big market like we were in St. Louis, where there's 12,000 transactions, 15,000 transactions in an up year, do you think you can survive by just ignoring 6,000 or 7,500 of those transactions? It sounds ridiculous when I say it like that, but that's what agents do, right? I don't like working this. I don't like doing this boring activity. We are violating the general premise of where this occurs. There is no discussion in here about these referrals occurring because it's screen to screen versus belly to belly. People make decisions based on, and this is a non-real estate thing, people make decisions to purchase based on face-to-face transactions. You eventually have to get in front of somebody. You can certainly do it over the phone. The conversion rates are not as good. We talked about this before in previous sessions. You're never going to convert as well over the phone as you will in person. And that's where we'll talk about nurturing leads in a future webinar, where we see some of these successes for people that have inside sales and how you do this. So repeat and referrals. 88% of buyers said they would use their agent again. 63% would recommend them. So what ends up happening is, if only 12% actually use the buyer agent the second time or later, it's very big confirmation that the linkage between what they actually say at the time of the transaction and what they end up doing is like night and day. It drops from what we're looking at here is a high number, 88%, down to 12% actual. That's your opportunity. What it says is, if they're only interviewing one agent, I need to be the agent that gets recommended. And we'll talk about how you do that as we get further into the session today. Now, the sell side is not that different. Again, we went through this in detail in a previous week. You're going to want to, if you're interested in this and understanding it further, go listen to that entire hour call. But look at it on the sell side. It's also 88%. It's a very high number, and it's up from 2001. The number on the buy side and the sell side are no different. In other words, it is not a different percentage, and both percentages have been rising. So again, the people that are trying to disintermediate the real estate agents, the numbers do not support that. It says buyer in the paragraph, but it's actually sellers. It didn't get changed there in case anybody's a stickler for detail. It's one of those things where the numbers are in the NAR data are virtually identical, and it has to do with the fact that the outlier transactions for family members and other transactions like FSBOs are always a small percentage. It's never been higher than 12%, except if you go all the way back to 2001 when there were a lot of transactions that occurred otherwise. So if anything, the internet has been a great source of information. The new models have been a great way of getting things out there, but it hasn't affected it. So let's look at the sell side. It's the same as the buy side. It's not about celebrity. It's not about being a member of some ridiculous, fictitious association of experts. It's about being a proven producer. The same way people pick a surgeon, the same way people pick other professionals, CPA, financial planners. They're going to want to make sure that you're competent, and they're going to want to get a referral from a friend, family member, or another peer. Could be a coworker, could be a member of a church or some other association. The numbers are not that different. When you look at it, the 38% and the 22%, it's a very big percentage. The reason it's lower than the buy side is the sell side is seen as a more of a business transaction. It's seen more as a vetted process. But look at the reality. They only 70% and even higher percent only contacted one agent. Unlike expireds, where we know it's a more than one agent on average, or for sale by owners. Again, if the 50% of the transactions in your market are going to get referred this way and get sourced this way, 70% of the time you're never going to have any competition. I mean, you can't build a more solid business model, and we'll talk about how you have to operate to succeed in this, and why that model of that inside sales agent was so successful for, and that's not an isolated instance, it's just the latest business case study to come out. 70%, no competition. Over 50% again of the transactions on the sell side come from repeat or a referral from those same sources. These are also, if you look at it, numbers that have dropped from what people are saying to NAR when they're done at the end of the transaction. And there's a reason or two that are a little bit different for the sell side. In other words, you sell somebody a house and then you list a house for them. They're a little bit different transactions. Sometimes it's a difference in the agents and how they do it, but it's the same broken linkage. It's a weak follow-up. That is the number one thing that compromises people, right? They never hear from their agent again. Agent retires. Agent is not around. And when they get ready to transact business, if you remember from the week that we talked about this, one of the other trends that's occurring that's not on this slide is that the turnover rate in many, many neighborhoods has gone from 6 or 7 years to 10 years. So there's a long period of time for a homeowner before they transact again. It doesn't mean everybody falls into that category, but this is, again, the opportunity. There's two ways to look at it, right? Even though there's a higher percentage than on the buy side that do a repeat transaction with their agent, still not the majority, right? You got things starting in the 80% that end up down in the very low percentages for actuals. That's not what they end up doing. And so when we look at the actuals, they actually drop into these very low numbers because nobody follows up, because somebody learns of somebody new, and 10 years later or 8 years later from when they purchased, it's a different world for them. They have a different group of people, their tribe, their network, their neighbors are all different, right? Because things are constantly changing. And this is, again, the opportunity. One, we're going to talk about two sides of this. You need to be much more aggressive about staying in touch with your database. And you need to be reinforcing based on your expertise and your continued production that you're still in the business to avoid getting disintermediated by some other agent. The numbers and the data tell us this is very common that other agents can dislodge you, especially if you're not doing follow-up. But that's also your opportunity because the majority of the time you can take advantage of this. So let's talk a little bit about market experts. We talked a little bit about the reality of what goes on as it pertains to the buy side or the sell side. The reality is if you're in denial about your market, the market conditions, demographics, could be by price point, could be part of the market that has shifted, it could be your overall market, you're not going to be able to outmarket and position and say you're a celebrity agent, you're an expert, I've joined some association, I've got Barbara Corcoran saying that I'm wonderful and showing up in a picture. It will eventually become really clear. First of all, your population may not think anything of Barbara Corcoran, and if it comes out and one of your competitors is nice enough to let the people know that you're such a good steward of your money, you spent $50,000 to have her show up in a picture with you, somebody might work with you, right, if they're into that kind of stuff. But the demographics and psychographics would say that if I'm a seller or I'm a potential client, that you probably don't make good decisions if you thought that was a good use of your money. It's a very risky strategy. And that's just one example, right? There's associations you can join that will position you as an authority and give you a little logo you can use. The commonality to all these things is they're snake oil. We talked about that a few weeks ago. And prospects, based on the demographics that I just went through, don't make decisions that way. In other words, the snake oils purveyors will tell you something that doesn't validate against the numbers in the market. You can't have over half of the transactions, buy side or listing side, get sourced through two different, either repeat or the referral, and have their business models be valid. This is not how people make transactions. Now, can you have somebody who is attracted to this message contact you? Yeah, but you're still not focused on 50% of the market transactions. So it's not like the endorsement videos and photos and all this other stuff won't work. It's just not how people source things. Doesn't mean you can't find somebody that goes, wow, okay, yeah, Barbara Corcoran thinks you're great. I'm going to go do this. You have to decide. I mean, that's just the ego-based way of going after a business. Will it work sometimes? Absolutely. But you're ignoring over 50% of the transactions. The best real estate market expert has a track record of success. They don't focus on being a celebrity or an authority. Here's the side effect that will happen is the press and others will start to come to you if you're demonstrating expertise in the market. We do this in St. Louis. I was new to the market. I've been in the market less than 2 years, and I had people from the Wall Street Journal to the local Post-Dispatch paper to the Christian Science Monitor calling me and contacting me because they wanted to get my insight on what's going on in the market. Never once did I do any kind of authority or celebrity. Believe me, those of you that know me well would know that I wanted to stay out of the limelight. I would never want to focus on something like that. I don't want the attention. You put a big target on your back. It's not something that it usually ends up very well. Why did that occur? Because I understood in detail market conditions. I couldn't just say, oh, it's a hot market thing, listings are selling quickly. I could give you exactly what's going on and even compare between the different price points. Go listen to our market condition webinar series. I know we've shared this with you before. And it's going through the total market overview and explaining to buyers or sellers about what's really going on in your market. If you're not going to do this, somebody else will in your market. And the reason that with 50% of the transactions either go in repeat or the referral, you're going to get selected is that this is something that you convey to them and continue to convey to them instead of just calling them up and asking them for business. People and agents that skip this are missing the largest opportunity, along with proof of production, to demonstrate that they're a successful expert in the market. And performance matters. I don't even want to say it's disgusting, but it's disingenuous in social media that these entitled agents who don't do very much, they're low volume practitioners, or they're evangelists for socialism that want to say that the high volume producers and the people that would have transactional expertise based on experience are egotistical, they're jerks. Now, does it mean that there aren't some people like that? Absolutely. But the vast majority of people who have extreme expertise in the market are not that way. And so be careful, because don't get caught up in these discussions. They're out there, right? It's the same problem we have in the United States, where you have this entitlement attitude and this stuff, and it's very pervasive in real estate. And people want to drive a negativity to expertise. And if you talk to sellers, again, this is not what they look at. They don't look at that, oh, I like Susie or John because he's really a nice person, or she's really, really nice and sweet. When it comes down to it, they're going to make a referral based on some amount of expertise. They're going to have some of that come into play. They may not tell you that, but they certainly don't do it on a charitable basis and go, well, you know, she doesn't do very much business. I think we should give her an opportunity. That's not how transactions are referred. That's not how consumers that don't know you make a decision. It's not just expireds that want to know about your success. Every once in a while on social media, you'll see somebody get a response from a consumer that's a potential seller, for example, and then they post it in these groups so they can crowdsource their answer, and the answers are ridiculous. God forbid they fall into that category of a higher volume producing agent, because then all of the entitled agents want to start the argument of the fact that, oh, you do transaction volume above the norm for our industry, you must be a jerk. Nothing could be farther from the truth. There are the outliers that are jerks, but don't buy in or subscribe to that. We're going to get into why the volume of what you do. I mentioned it before about the inside sales example, where he was doing the volume, what somebody would do in 4 days, he's working 20 days. He's got 100 potential opportunities, you have 16. The same thing comes from your shelf space inventory. If you take 10 listings a year and your competitor takes 100, your ecosystem's not going to support a team. It's not going to support you, probably, and you're not going to have opportunities. Not at the same level. So social media is risky. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. If you're not driving expertise about the market, you're not talking about real estate, which is what they would expect to hear from you, you're going to want to segment it away. You know, I don't know, set up your own private group somewhere and go off in there. We strongly suggest not including clients in the middle of the discussion because of how social media works. If you're friends with clients on there and you post things, just remember 50% of the transactions occur based on references. If a client, even though they might agree with you, comments on it, their world on social media, whether it's 500 people or 5,000, all sees what you posted. So that 50% of the transactions you're putting at risk. They might agree with you on whatever topic you're posting on social media, but your client now makes a comment. Maybe they're supporting you, maybe they ask you a question about why you posted what you posted. As soon as they do that, the way social media works, especially on things like Facebook, everybody that's a friend of them now sees what you posted. The two are now linked together. And if we go back to 2 slides ago, if 50% of the transactions come from a referral, a repeat or a referral of friend, family, neighbor, coworker, that is too big of a part of the business to risk on social media. You should either be a ghost if you can't control yourself, or set up a private group. We strongly discourage you from making potentially controversial, even though that you feel strongly about this, posts on social media if you're going to have people make decisions about you. Because again, even if you get a comment that supports you, that person's world, not everybody in their world is going to support your position, and they just saw what you stand for. So even if that person says, yeah, I think you should call John, they're going to remember from social media what you posted. So be very, very careful. So let's talk about interrupting the process. The process we're talking about, we opened up with the shiny object discussion, interrupting the process. And this is the process of being in denial, running a script in your head that says it doesn't work, any of these dysfunctional things, chasing things that make you feel good, keeping busy. First thing you got to do is you got to make sure your pillars of business match the marketplace. Well, we already know everybody should have 2 pillars of business. You need to not ignore your repeat clients, because it's not about them, even though they're not going to move for 10 years on average according to NAR. Well, you got 10 years of time at which 40-something% of the time, buy side or listing side, they have an opportunity to refer somebody. If you're wondering why those referrals don't occur, it's because you missed that as a pillar of business. So if we think about that from the network standpoint, if you're not being purposeful about adding people into your database, you're going to have a much smaller opportunity, and you need to follow up on that database in addition to getting it in there. I went from, and I've mentioned this to many of you on calls, on one-on-one calls or training calls, I went into St. Louis as a brand new agent. The only people I knew were Stephanie, her family, and real estate agents at the market center I was in. Not a great database for referrals. And we went from 0 to 1,200, slightly less than 1,300, 1,280-something people in a database in less than 4 years. That's being purposeful about who you meet and putting them in there. That's an extreme example. I tend to be very aggressive about what I do in terms of business development. But what we hate and we cringe is we'll talk to somebody that's been in the market for 10 plus years, not even in real estate, but they've lived there that long. And, or even worse, they've been in real estate for 10 years. And you ask them about their past clients and their database, and they say they have 200 or 300 people. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. You're missing another 800 people or more if you've been in your market that long. Don't beat yourself up on it. Just be realistic to say, I've got to make this a priority. If I need somebody to be accountable, I need to be able to provide my list of 5 to 7 people per week that I'm going to add into my network that I can follow up with. Again, if we don't do these first 2 pillars of business, we're doing it the hard way. I started out absolutely the hard way in doing the business in real estate. I went after for sale by owners and expired, canceled, with ruins. It was all I could do, and unfortunately there were lots of them in St. Louis. Now the reality is many of you don't have that opportunity. It's not the case in low inventory markets where you can actually build that to be a big part of your business. So don't ignore the add to 5 to 7 people to your database. I spent a lot of time on that because that's probably, wouldn't you agree, Stephanie, the most common thing we see where somebody says, hey, I've been in the business 10 years and I've got 200 people in my database.
Yeah, ask the question again, because the question we usually ask them is, how did that happen, that you didn't meet new people?
Well, it's not that they don't meet people. It's they don't see it as a priority to put them into their system to follow up. And what it is, I really believe, is nobody is pointing out the obvious, which is the NAR stats have not changed. If anything, they've gotten better over time to support these 2 pillars of business, repeat and the referral part of it. Now, there are people that try and do this, and they follow systems where it's everything from pies to all sorts of seasonal things. Again, don't miss the previous slide's topic, which is they're really going to pick you and refer you, not because they like you. The vast majority of the time, and the NAR data supports this, It's a competency and an expertise. Now, if you happen to combine the two and you actually do enough volume and you've demonstrated your proof of production, you might be able to do both because they don't just see you as the person who's, dropping off things on pop buys. Agents that try and reverse it and they just do pop buys and they're wondering why it doesn't work, well, they're missing the proof of production. They're missing the network growth where you're purposeful about adding it. So I think the answer to your question, Stephanie, is they don't see it as a priority. They're like, I can just create new business. I don't like old business. I just want to recreate it from scratch. And what's interesting about that is you can get really, really stagnant fast if you're not continuing to grow over time on the business development. Seasonally appropriate messaging, we're going to talk about that here in a couple of minutes. We did a whole week's topic on this about the fact that you have to be looking at this like an athlete does, seasonally. There's preseason, there's in-season, and there's off-season. And if you're not doing the right activity at the right time of year and you don't change your message, you're going to have people be fairly alienated. Trying to convince somebody by sending them the top 10 list of why you need to be on the market over the holidays is just going to irritate people. You need to be more purposeful. We talked about this at length during that particular week's topic. Go back and listen to it again. But this is a common problem. People, just because you need business doesn't mean that the person should be on the market over the holidays. They're still a good lead if they want to put their house on the market in March or April. And you're going to take an uneven amount if you're on track, as we'll talk about here in a minute, during different quarters or different months of the year. Agents do this consistently, and they end up taking a lot of time off. You'll have agents that will do 100, 150 transactions a year, and they take 140, 160 days of the year off. You scratch your head and go, God, this stuff doesn't work for me. Well, again, you're not working. Those agents are very purposeful and on track. Some of them have inside sales doing a lot of that initial cultivation and identification. So there are some things you can do, but you can't afford to invest in that if you don't do the business development to start with, unless you happen to be very wealthy or married to a wealthy spouse, for example, or a family member that will give you money. It's either you're pulling the cart and doing the hard work and doing the business development, or you've got enough cash flow from your business to look at this as an outsourced additional business. And for some of you, and I've heard you say this, that you think that you're in some unique market where this is not going to work, meaning inside sales or any of the other strategies from a business development standpoint. And when you're kidding yourself about that, one of the things I want you to remember is it doesn't work that way. Real estate is not unique to Los Angeles or Chicago or Miami. These core strategies, with very few exceptions, work in every market, meaning that the stats I gave you on how people source their business, why those two pillars have to be at the core of your business, are not different. You don't get to give yourself an out and say, well, this doesn't work for me. Again, it's because you're not working. You're doing 4 days worth of work and somebody in your market's doing 20. They have 100 opportunities and you have 10 or 16. They're going to beat you every time. So don't let yourself have that out. Now, the biggest database and network wins. We've talked a little bit about this. This should be something you look at every day. Have I talked to enough people so that I'm growing my network and my database and my future business opportunity? If 50% of the transactions are repeat, and those referral sources we talked about earlier, you're going to be hamstrung and really handicapped, if you're not laser focused on this. I would set as a minimum 5 to 7 new people into your network on a weekly basis. And don't discriminate. I have some of the sources. I don't have time to get into the detail on the storyline, but my biggest referral sources they were union negotiators, for example, not CPAs or accountants or lawyers or divorce lawyers or some of the things that you see touted out there. Those work. They take a long time to cultivate compared to somebody else that's going to have their own network that's a large network. Maybe they've lived in the area for a long time. So you need to be very purposeful about this. If you want to star it, go back and listen to the week we went through this. We talked about it in length. And demonstrating market knowledge, proof of production is probably one of the most powerful things. Proof of production is a differentiator. This is something that you can't buy. Let me just finish the point here, and I'll let you jump in, Stephanie. You cannot buy proof of production. You're either listing and selling homes, or you're not. Unlike the entitled agents that say that all high-volume producers are jerks and they don't ever talk to the clients again and they do a terrible job, that's not the reality. What clients will pay attention to is your repetitive proof of production. They'll pay attention to, are you really doing something different? And the reason this works, before I let Stephanie jump in, is that's not what they're normally seeing. These are the conversations that occur in neighborhoods. Well, John's a realtor, and I know he's married to Susie, and Susie tells us she's not sure what he does. You know, she's an executive with some high-tech company and makes $175,000 a year, and the snickering in the neighborhood is, well, I guess all agents are that way. You know, John pretends like he's working, but she's told me at happy hour last week that he's only done 4 or 5 transactions. That's why it's so easy to dislodge those referral sources, because they don't often see proof of production. If you're listing 50 houses a year and selling things, and you're driving proof of production into there, it's easy to be the most referred person. They have no idea that anybody does this. And that's your opportunity. And Stephanie, I'm sorry, I went on a little bit longer than you probably wanted me to, but
no, that's okay. I'm used to. Proof of production, actually showing that you're a total market expert, requires work. Yep. Get over it. You all, some of you that are on this call, you paid that dude with radio, Barbara Corcoran, $50,000 to be a celebrity testimony for you. $50,000. I have talked to some of you who said, well, my friend was doing it, and it worked for him. Well, I'm going to try it too. Well, how do you know it worked for him? I am working this moment while I'm listening to Kevin on my 2016 one-sheet business planning based on sources. And I'm going to put on there a line item, honey, that says celebrity marketing. How much money did you make last year from celebrity marketing? How much money are you going to make in 2016 on celebrity marketing? Because it's easier for you in your head, if you want to, spend $50,000 for Barbara Corcoran to say you're awesome versus having to work for a living, which means becoming a market expert. We are not going to stop banging this drum. Well, and if you're too darn lazy to become the market expert, and if you don't do the work you have to do to understand real estate, you don't deserve the business. You didn't earn it. How's that one? Write it down. I'm done.
Well, and the reality is there's many, many agents, and don't confuse this, right? There's a franchise system, and they've got close to 130,000 agents. So this is usually out everywhere with all the examples of their lauded superstars. Don't confuse somebody who does 300 transactions a year. We talked about this in the team versus rainmaker session.
Yep.
Go listen to that session. If they're making, and it's absolute fiction if they say they're making 40% net. That is a myth. It doesn't exist. We can give you hundreds of examples of people that have failed because they did a tremendous amount of volume. They're spending an absolute fortune getting it. And they're trying to support this ecosystem of all these buyer agents and listing agents and team support people. They've got 46 different marketing programs going. And at the end of the day, there's another agent in their market that's doing 40 transactions that's making more money than them.
Yeah.
Don't ever confuse these hyper production numbers with success. Now, there are exceptions to this. There are people that'll do 125, 200 transactions, 300 transactions. They're very listing focused. They're a rainmaker. They don't invest in or spend all these things. You won't hear them on the radio. You won't see them investing $50,000 in Barbara Corcoran. What they will do is they will build their network. They will build their database. They will do an excellent job. 100% of them have those core sources of business as a core part of their success. And they don't subscribe to the I'm going to try every shiny object. So the slide here is just a reminder to go back and look at the different seasons in that seasonal session about being a professional athlete. You should be taking a disproportionate amount of your listings. 65% is what we talked about between January 1st and either May 31st or June 30th. Certainly by June 30th, you should have 65% of your annual production done on the listing side. You're missing an opportunity to do this from a seasonal standpoint if you're trying to just divide the year by 10 months. Say you want to take 100 listings and say, well, I'm going to take 10 a month. That's not how the world works for people that are on track. Some other agent in your market is doing it the easy and the efficient and the high momentum way. They're taking 65 of their 100 listings by the end of May, certainly by the end of June. When agents get this on track, they can almost coast for 50% of the year. This is how agents take 140 days off a year. What you're not seeing is, because again, you just see the top line number. They did 150 transactions. Well, they did all that in a very compressed period of time. They aren't sitting around in December doing anything other than looking, as it says here, when you look at the Q4, they're looking at very few listings taken, and they're looking at a huge ramp up in opportunities that are identified. Right now in your market, we're here in December, we're closing in on the holidays and the new year. There are agents that are heads down, calling and following up on leads. They employ inside salespeople if they're investing in that, and they're identifying people that are Q1 and Q2 opportunities. And look at that ramp up, right? In Q4, you're talking about identifying 40 to 50 opportunities. By the time you get to Q1, you're 150 to 200. By the time you get to Q2, it's 300 or 400 plus opportunities. Do you think you can show up on April 1st and play catch up? Or February 1st and play catch up? You absolutely can't. Somebody else has already identified that opportunity. So your peers and the herd, if you will, that take off after Halloween are missing the opportunity here, as we're talking about in Q4, to identify opportunities. So your listings taken and your transactional volume is going to plummet in the fourth quarter because you're going to be focused on something else. You're on identification. If you have inside sales now, your 100% focus is identified leads and qualifying them and requalifying for time frame. Very few people will answer the question, if we were hypothetically on the market and we had a contract next week, could you go through the inspections and all of the process with a buyer over the holidays and be ready to move by the end of January? There are very few people that are going to say, yeah, that's not a problem. There are more people who say, well, we'd really like to start the process then, be on the market by middle to end of February, and then be moved closer to the end of the school year. And that's why you have one of your competitors or more in your market that's going to take 65% of their listings in the first few months of the year, because they've already identified all those opportunities. And it's interesting that agents don't get this and connect the dots. Part of it's because some of our peers in the coaching world teach linear thinking. Well, our business planning classes, you're going to have 10 months divided by 10. We're going to assume that you're not going to work in certain parts of the year, and then just think about doing this many contacts per day or per week or per month and taking this many listings. Others go the opposite direction. They're like, well, take 100 listings in 100 days, and here's a plan to do that. Well, imagine you try and apply that out of seasonality, or you didn't do what you needed to do. In other words, the agent that's going to take 100 listings in 100 days did what in the fourth quarter? Something very different than the agent who tries to do this on January 1st instead of starting it on October 1st. There's a difference in this nurtured mega funnel. It has to do with timing, priority, and seasonality. You got to reset your expectations, like it says on the left there. You need to look at these things as valuable assets, and every person you ever come in contact with is potentially 50% of your business, and you can't ignore them. So the ISA model is one of the things you're going to hear a ton about. They're writing the new version of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book. It's going to be a big part of it. It's one of those things that you need to be looking at. If you don't get it and you don't believe in it, you're never going to want to invest in it. So the boring tasks that we talked about, you need to be focused on. All of my success comes from a nurtured funnel. The bigger I build my network over time, the more successful I'll be. So you look at direct activity by a rainmaker and then eventually through an ISA, you could be adding future listing opportunities at a pace of 50 or more per month. Don't ever let yourself be convinced that my market's different. Unless you're in a small little resort town where there's less than 500 agents and there's very few transactions, you're going to have plenty of opportunities to identify. You got to scale appropriately, but many, many of you are in big markets. If your market is 5,000 transactions, there are 50 people you can find that are telling you at some point in time they're going to list the property. It just goes with the transactions. And remember, half of the time, they're not going to interview more than one agent. It's more than half of the time. They're not going to interview more than one agent. And then the way they've picked the agent they're going to talk to is that referral. So if I don't identify them and do proof of production and differentiate myself from the herd, some other knucklehead is going to get referred by a neighbor. Some other really incompetent agent, even though they think that they're the neighborhood joke like I described a few minutes ago, is going to get referred. And meanwhile, you're over there messing around with shiny objects, not working. And if you look at it, it's a rather simple thing, which is the more opportunities, the more future opportunities for listings especially that I've identified, the easier my job is. Back to the start of what I said. Do you think that rainmaker who has 100 opportunities new coming in per month from that inside salesperson, and you've only got 10 or 16, they're going to crush you in the market. And it's not because they're marketing. They're going to crush you in the market because they have more people to go meet with and more people to talk to. So that if you only have 10 or 16 opportunities, you're going to be hung up on, oh my God, I got to convert these. I got to convert a lot of them in order to hit my plan. And the rainmaker that's got 100 of them, all they got to do is look for the right opportunities. Oh, your sister's a real estate agent? Congratulations, good luck. Right? They go on to the next lead.
Hey,
if you don't have enough.
Pick me. The 80-20 rule, honey, I think what you're saying over and over again, which we talk about over and over again, but I want to just kind of help tie this down. 20% of the industry earns 80%. Yes or no?
Well, it's like 97.3, actually. It's
well,
not even 80.
That's a conversation I want to have with you. Is that 20% of the industry, even for those of you on the call, you're not going to get it. You're not going to, because 20% of the industry earns 80%, but the truth is 3% of the industry earns 97%, give or take a few percentages. Let that settle. And then here's even better, the 80-20 rule, and I'm loving this 80-20 rule right now. 80% of most of what you all do that are on this call, 80% of what you do daily gives you return of investment of 20%. So what I'm saying is most of you are spending 80% of your time messing around. And you expect to earn $100,000 because 80% of what you do is messing around. You're probably earning, I can't think how many agents we know across this country, not in coaching with us, that they're lucky if they make $80,000 a year. So for those of you who are with us who are making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year, the ones that get it and get it right are focused on their damn 20%. What do I have to do that nothing else matters when they give me 80% of my return on investment? Prospecting, following a business model, having a strategy, following your schedule, having an accountability coach, some sort of a trainer who's been there, done that before you. If you're on this call and you're not writing this stuff down, good luck.
Well, the next bullet talks exactly about that, which is as a rainmaker, if you're not spending 80% of your efforts on what matters, requalifying leads, nurturing leads, getting people into a follow-up program that you're going to control and be, using to drive proof of production so that you can differentiate yourself and stay in touch with them and requalify and then requalify again, you're doing the wrong things. The business is actually that stupid simple.
Yeah.
And if you look at me going into St. Louis, I was and I was just replicating what I learned from other agents all over the country that were doing it. The secret sauce, it's easy to go beat your competition. And here's the bad news. And it's not me because I'm all that. I could come into any one of your markets and in 6 months eclipse your production, unless you're already doing 100+ transactions.
Right.
But if you wanted any further validation of the fact that you're feeding yourself a loop of information in your brain that's just not valid, that's what you need to worry about. Because it's not going to be me, but some other agent that suddenly gets it. And what you're missing is it's not because they joined some other franchise, or it's not because they did something really, really top secret. It's just they started to go to work on what matters. They're very purposeful about being listing focused and business development oriented. And the payoff in this inside sales nurtured funnel, the big payoff comes in 14 to 16 months. We need to stop telling ourselves that, well, I did this for a couple of weeks, it didn't work. I made calls 2 days last week, it doesn't work. No, again, you're not working. It's not the strategy that doesn't work. It's a minimum of 6 months before you're going to see consistent track record. And don't even think about doing something and investing in something like inside sales unless you're going to go 14 to 16 months. That's when you're going to get the big payoff. And here's the reality. If you don't go that direction, we're not saying everybody has to. Here's what's going to happen. One of your competitors is, and their network and their nurtured leads are going to eclipse yours by a factor of 10 to 30 times the opportunities. So they get to pick and choose from hundreds of potential opportunities. Get to work with the best sellers, get a list of the best properties, and while you're scrapping through trying to figure out, God, I've got this difficult seller, they won't reduce their price, they're really difficult to deal with. You know what, I used to send those deals to my competitor because I could care less. I didn't need to. I listed 15 other properties that month. But I also had hundreds of potential opportunities. And that's a big thing that agents don't get. It's not doing the minimum amount of business development, it's maximizing it so you have the biggest opportunity. Again, don't do the minimum effective piece. The nurturing piece is what you want to look at. And these next 2 bullet points are a big part of what you need to look at, which is these technology-based CRM, drip campaign, email campaigns, they claim they can get higher returns than they actually do, but the reality, 6 to 8% conversion. Again, this is the not proof of production related one with calls. The second one, if I had a bunch of opportunities, again, we're talking about mega, huge funnels of opportunities over a year period. You're talking about 36 as a conversion rate. Well, that's a decent number. But the reality is you should probably do more like 120. The 20% conversion rate means you've dropped either through qualification or just whatever reason, didn't connect with the seller, the majority of the opportunities, 8 out of 10. And you converted 2 out of 10. And you still did 120 transactions. This is why the biggest funnel wins. And if you don't invest in business development, you don't have those opportunities. So let's wrap up. I know we're a couple minutes, or getting close to being a couple minutes over.
Yeah.
And I want to get to the last part of this. As a precursor to the comments I'm going to make here, be very, very laser focused on business development. Don't screw up the first 2 that we talked about, which is repeat and the referral and building your network. If you're finding opportunities, God, the follow-up on those is the simplest thing to do. And just realize it's not a matter of closing every one. It's a matter of having more opportunities. In other words, the person with the bigger opportunity pool always wins, even if they do a horrible job at conversion. They don't have to convert like you would have to convert if you only have 10 and they have 600. They will crush you every time. You might be scratching your head going, God, they must be doing something different. How are they out marketing me? No, it's just they're doing a much more purposeful job of conversion. So get realistic on your business expectations. If you're not going to work, you're not going to get the opportunity to create the type of business and the transactions and the income that your competitors are. You have to go to work. This is the bad news. There is no way around this. Buying business and trying to support a big ecosystem of a team is a high volume, high revenue, low margin model. And it works for some people. I have direct experience with this, and we have lots of examples of this, but be realistic on your business expectations. It's not the grass is greener and I must be at the wrong spot. I need to just go online and pay attention to what people are saying. That's not how the world works in real estate. The NAR data doesn't even support that as a basic premise. Now, get comfortable with boring tasks. Unless your primary objective in real estate is to be able to hold seminars, go up on panels, and travel around and have everybody pat you on the back, just get comfortable with boring things. Nobody wanted to shadow me in St. Louis because all I did was business development and run appointments. And they couldn't understand why, after watching me for a couple of hours, they don't need to spend a week with me because it's boring. Most of the agents in the office, we were the largest independent in St. Louis. Well, by the time, and again, this is when there were a lot of expireds, but by the time they would come into the office at somewhere between 9:30 and 11, I would already have booked an appointment or two and been done with more business development than they would do all week, every day. I would have more business development done per day than they would do all week by 9:30 in the morning. That is how you succeed. I went to work. It also gave me a tremendous amount of freedom to not work. I didn't work evenings for the most part. I didn't work weekends. If you're listening to Focus and you focus on business development, it's this boring activity that you got to look at it and go, well, if I get all these benefits from it, and if you need to do a Ben Franklin and put all the benefits you get to commit yourself to do the boring activity, and you need to get uncomfortable working less hours. I don't think Stephanie knew what I did with most of my time because I had to, because she was managing the office. I had to find things to do to keep me busy. I would go preview properties. I would go out and do different things. I would drive around and learn more about what's going on in the market, look at new construction. I didn't have anything to do. You need to get comfortable being uncomfortable with the fact that you're going to get, if you stop doing these things you shouldn't be doing, you're going to have a ton of time. And if the first couple of days you're sitting around your office and you got nothing to do, it means you weren't lead generating. You're not doing business development. Go ahead.
We were interviewing somebody. He's in the contractor business. A couple weeks ago, I was, and he said, "If I truly do that instead of this, which I'm kind of in that already 50%." He asked me this. I'm not kid you not. What will I do with my time? It's a struggle with people. What will I do with my time? I don't, something good. Remember, there's 7 circles of life in our PURAVIDA world. But he pushed back. Like, well, why would I go home? I don't know, be with your kids. You need to walk about 10 miles a day. You need to lose a lot of weight, and you need to lift weights. And I mean, we're coaching them from a physical standpoint as well as spiritual and business. But I think a lot of us said, what will I tell my husband I do all day? I'm done working by 9 a.m. and I go on appointments 2 or 3 days a week. Because the money's easy, people. Quit telling yourself these excuses. I wrote this down. I'm like, 2016, get a life, do what you want to do. Go do something else. You only have to work 20 hours a week if you're in coaching with us. 20 hours a week. We simplify it down so stupid, it's ridiculous. So I want to thank you before we hang up. I want to Kevin, one thing I wanted to announce to the folks that are joining us is next year we're going to go to smaller bites. I know this is the longest call of the series, and we are wrapping it up. But next year, Kevin and I are going to go to smaller bites when we do these sorts of events, maybe in and on and off in 18 minutes or something, so that you can I know what happens is that maybe you hung up and you picked it up later, but a lot of you don't come back to it. So what we're hearing from feedback from you all is you guys want smaller bites. I just want to let you know that that's what we'll be launching in January, pretty frequently too, because Kevin's really good at this. Kevin's really good at talking to you. I think there's a lot that we have to share with you all, but I just want to drop that little tidbit there. Go, honey. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to step on your toes.
No, not a problem. And, the uncomfortable part of it is trying to not violate the reality of the business. There are no highly profitable, high-volume producers that are not listing focused. There are plenty of people that do plenty of volume, including on these teams, but the profitability is not there. The amount of time it takes, the efficiency. So listings are where it's at. Large, nurtured pools of opportunities are where it's at. And just get comfortable not doing what everybody else is doing. There is no secret that it's going to occur. And this is the last comment I'm going to make. There is no secret that's going to occur on social media, so get off of there, that some agent's going to share that's going to dramatically change your business in 2016. But what's happening today is in your market, there's probably 10 or more agents that are taking your future listing opportunities away from you because you're not doing business development. You're not identifying these people that are going to list their house in 2016. And the NAR stats validate it. They're not going to interview more than one agent the majority of the time. They're going to pick a referral because they think everybody's the same in real estate for the most part because the people don't do proof of production. So don't be that agent. You can assure your success or your failure just based on whether you go to work or not and what you do when you work. And that's all I got on that one.
Okay. Hey, thanks for joining us, y'all, and have a great rest of 2015, and we look forward to seeing you in 2016. Bye.